Working with U.S. government.
How does the political system of the U.S. work? The United States has a representative democracy. The Constitution, Bill of Rights, is set of rules describing how the United States must be governed, which includes the rights of people. There is the federal system, which is power divided between nations and local states. Each state has its own limited independence, and the national government is the federal government. And then there is the unitary system, where the state is governed as a single unit, and there is only a centralized government. And there is name of the office where the of years selected for, and the executive is the president. It's 4 to 8 years. Their responsibility is to carry out and suggest laws. Then there is the legislative, the Congress, and it's the House of Representatives 2 years, and the Senate is 6 years. And their responsibilities is to make laws. And then there is the judicial, the Supreme Court, and its lifetime. And the responsibility is to interpret the Constitution and review laws.
What are the branches of government and what powers do they hold? Organization of the political system also found out the number of seats of the two parties in the two chambers of parliament. And the United States government is divided into 3 branches: the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. Each branch has a different duty, but all 3 branches must work together. The legislative branch is in charge of making laws. It is made up of the Congress and the several government agencies. Congress has 2 parts: the House of Representatives and the Senate. Members of the House of Representatives and Senate are voted into office by American citizens in each state. There are currently 100 senators, 435 representatives, 5 delegates, and 1 resident commissioner. The government agencies in the legislative branch. The agencies support the Congress.
The executive branch is vested in the President of the United States, who also acts as head of states and commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The President is responsible for implementing and enforcing the laws written by Congress, and to that end appoints the heads of the federal agencies, including the cabinet. The Vice President is also part of the executive branch, ready to assume the presidency should the need arise.
And then there is the judicial branch, and that is where the executive and legislative branches are elected by people. Members of the judicial branch are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. Article 3 of the Constitution, which establishes the judicial branch, leaves Congress a significant discretion to determine the shape and structure of the federal judiciary. Even the number of Supreme Court justices is left to the Congress. At times there have been as few as 6, while the current number is 9, with 1 of Chief Justice and 8 Associate Justice, has only been in place since 1869. The Constitution also grants Congress the power to establish courts inferior to the Supreme Court, and to that end Congress has established the United States District Courts, which try most federal cases, and 13 United States Courts of Appeals, which review appellate district court cases.
And how does the Supreme Court work? Who are the judges now? And how are they elected, and how long do they serve? The highest court in the land is the Supreme Court. It's the beginning of the Supreme Court had 5 members, but over time the number has increased. Since 1869, the Supreme Court has consisted of 9 justices. The Chief Justice of the United States and 8 Associate Justices. The Associate Justice has equal weight when voting on a case, but the Chief Justice has no casting vote or power to instruct colleagues. Decisions are made by a majority. There is a system of courts to appeal, of courts of appeal, which is below the Supreme Court, and below these courts there are district courts. Together, these 3 levels of courts represent the federal judicial system.
Who is eligible to become a member of the Supreme Court? The Constitution does not specify qualifications for justices, such as education, profession, age, or native-born citizenship. You do not have to be a lawyer or law school graduate, but all justices have been trained in the law. Many people from the 18th and 19th century justices studied law under mentor because there were few law schools in the country at that time. James F. Burns did not graduate from high school, but he taught himself about the law at age 23, and all Supreme Court judges are appointed for life. As said, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the United States. The court deals with matters concerning to the federal government, disputes between states, and interpretations of the Constitution. It can declare legislation or executive action made at any level of the government as unconstitutional, repealing the law and creating precedent for future law and decisions. But the Supreme Court can only rule on a lower court decisions, so they cannot take the initiative to consider a matter. There are 3 ways that a matter can come to the Supreme Court. 1. A federal authority makes a decision that is challenged as unconstitutional, which goes straight to the Supreme Court, which is not obliged to take it. 2. A state makes a decision which someone believes is unconstitutional, but the matter would have to have previously been heard by a federal court of appeal. There are 11 circuits covering the 50 states. 3. There is a conflict between states that needs to be resolved. If the 2 or more states are in the same circuit, the matter would first have to go to the appropriate federal court of appeal.
And currently the court has 8 justices and 1 vacancy after the death of Justice Antonin Scalia on February 13, 2016. Antonin Scalia was appointed by President Ronald Reagan, and Antonin Scalia served 29 years and 4 months in the Supreme Court. Besides Antonin Scalia, there are also 8 members who are Anthony Kennedy, who was appointed by Ronald Reagan, and he has served 28 years and 6 months in the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas, who was appointed by George H.W. Bush, he has served 24 years and 10 months in the Supreme Court. Ruth Bader, who was appointed by Bill Clinton, she has served 23 years in the Supreme Court. And Stephen Breyer, who was appointed by Bill Clinton, he has served 22 years and 1 month in the Supreme Court. John G. Roberts, who was appointed by George W. Bush, he has served 10 years and 11 months in the Supreme Court. Samuel A. Alito Jr., who was appointed by George W. Bush, he has served 10 years and 7 months in the Supreme Court. Sonia Sotomayor, who was appointed by Barack Obama, she has served 7 years in the Supreme Court. And then we have Elena Kagan, who was appointed by Barack Obama. She has served 6 years in the Supreme Court.
And how are they elected, and how long do they serve? We know the number of justices, and after Scalia died, the Supreme Court has split between 4 conservative justices appointed by Republican presidents, Roberts, Alito, Thomas, and Kennedy, and 4 liberal justices appointed by Democratic presidents, Ginsburg, Breyer, Kagan, and Sotomayor. The Republican Senate has refused to vote for President Obama's nominee to replace Scalia. During the next 4 years, the new president will likely nominate not only Scalia's replacement, but also an additional 3 new justices. Since 1971, the average age of retirement for a Supreme Court justice has been just under 79 years. Ginsburg is 83 years old, Kennedy is 80, and Breyer is 78 years old. Scalia, after all, was on the court for 30 years before he died. Thomas has been on the court for 25 years, and he's still only 68.
And I will explain the competitive democracy, which is a form of government where the powers of the sovereignty are delegated to a body of men elected from time to time, who exercise them for the benefit of the whole nation.
And I will explain participatory democracy. Officially, participatory democracy is direct democracy, in the sense that all citizens are actively involved in all important decisions. The definition commonly refers to movements such as civil rights movement or the women's suffrage movement that gather a group of people who democratically make decisions about the direction of the group. But the phrase participatory or participation democracy has come to mean the right of citizens in a democracy to participate. I would even say it means the obligation of citizens to participate in the decisions made by their governmental representatives that impact the lives of all citizens.
And the pluralist democracy model. Pluralism refers to a society system of government or organization that has different groups that keep their identities while existing with other groups or a more dominant group. Rather than just one group, subgroup, or culture dictating how things go, pluralism recognizes a larger number of competing interest groups that share the power. Pluralism serves as a model of democracy where different groups can voice their opinions and ideas. For example, the Amish people. Amish people live alongside those who are not Amish but travel by horse and buggy, do not have electricity, and have established stores, schools, and other organizations that are used by members of the Amish community.
And then there is the elitist democracy model. An elite democracy refers to a system of government in which the leaders of large bureaucratic organizations, corporate, governmental, or non-profit are able to exercise a significant degree of influence on the society. Most of the elected leaders in an elite democracy owe their positions to the sponsorship of these bureaucratic leaders or elites and will legislate in a manner that favors them. According to the elite theory in sociology and political science, a small minority of corporate, financial, or think tank policy discussion organizations wide power to a greater degree than the processes of the state democratically elected government.
And we will now translate some words, and we start off with affiliation, which is relation eller forbindelse. And then there is amendment, det er forbedring eller rettelse. And then there is bipartisan, og det er partiafhængighed, og det er når man tager hensyn til begge partier, uden at indblande begge partier i en aftale.
And then we have carrot and stick, som betyder belønning og straf. Og checks and balances. Checks and balances refererer til det system i USA, til det system, som USA har grundlagt, for at forsikre, at ingen regeringer bliver for meget, eller bliver alt for magtfulde.
And federation er forbund eller en sammenslutning, og gridlock er fastlåst situationen, sådan trafikkaos, og implement er realisere eller gennemføre.
Oppressive, det betyder undertrykkende eller noget, der er tyrannisk, og hvor partisan betyder, at man er tilhænger eller man er partibundet. Og så er der propent, som betyder fortaler, altså der er en, der er fortaler for et parti.
Ses, DOSE!